Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Urban Entrepreneur Show, where we spotlight resilient individuals who defy the odds to pursue their passions and create a positive change in the world and their communities. So today, we're going to have a little deep dive with, um, I would say, at the vital intersection. There's always the intersection of mental health and entrepreneurship. And with us, we have a remarkable young guest. She is, as you can see on the stage, on the video here, that she is absolutely delightful. Just look at that bright smile. I love those red glasses. I mean, just
Thank you.
in case you didn't notice. Red is one of my favorite colors. But this remarkable guest is Destiny Hilliard-Thomas. She is the founder of Destiny Speak LLC. And in this episode, which we've titled Thriving Against All Odds, Mental Health Strategies for Urban Entrepreneurs, Destiny is going to share with us some insights gleaned from her experiences and her journey as a mental health therapist and advocate. So she's going to be able to help us with some practical strategies and wisdom, because we need that as urban entrepreneurs, to help to prioritize our mental health, our mental well-being, and also, while we're doing that, pursue our dreams. So welcome to the Urban Entrepreneur Show, Destiny.
Thank you so much. It's an honor being here. Thank you for having me.
Oh yeah, the whole mental health, uh, is no, they're using another term for it, but mental wellness is really key across the globe right now. I just returned from Cambodia, and that's still, people are still recovering from the pandemic, and I'm sure that that is still the case here in the US. And the people that have probably felt it more so have been the entrepreneurial community. And so I'm just really excited that, you're going to be here and talk to us about some of that. But before I do that, give me a little backstory on how and who and what and all of that.
Okay, well, a little background about me. I graduated with my undergrad in interdisciplinary studies, which is basically elementary education. I became a full-time teacher. I was teaching in Baltimore County Public Schools. I was a fifth grade teacher, solo teacher, no aid or no additional help in the classroom of 31 10-year-olds. I also was working on my master's degree at the same time. So I was completing an internship with students at a public boarding school, doing that while I was teaching. So I definitely, it led to burnout. So I eventually left the classroom in that capacity, and I started working at Job Corps, which is an older population, so ages 16 to 24. And I was teaching there. Then I became academic manager, and I, shifted into different roles. And then I ultimately became a school counselor, and now I'm here as a mental health therapist. My journey here wasn't as, I guess, traditional as, okay, I went from undergrad, I got my master's. That part was traditional, right? Right after undergrad, I went straight for my master's while I was working full time. And I completed my master's degree in counseling, but I did not take the additional step of completing the assessment, which is the NCE, right? The National Counselor's Examination. Why? Well, because of fear. The test is expensive. The test is very intense and rigorous. And it's, you hear all these horror stories where people are saying they, felt so defeated, they didn't pass. I kept letting those, voices speak to me and kind of dissuade me from going forward and, realizing my ability and my capability doesn't necessarily measure up to the person next to me. That's not to diminish theirs, but everybody's journey is different, right?
Yes.
So fast forward, how many years? I earned my degree in December of 2013, right? I was pregnant with my son, who is now almost 10 years old. And I took the NCE in February of 2021. So it took the pandemic shutting things down and me being really at a space in my life where I was really still, for the first time, I still worked throughout the pandemic, but I was still, because I wasn't going to a bunch of events and friends' birthdays and traveling back and forth to New Jersey, which is my home state. I live currently in Maryland. And so I was pretty much able to, what I call, take everything off the shelf that I once shelved, right?
Yeah.
So I had started Speak Destiny back in 2017, didn't do anything with it. I wanted it to be, at that point, I wasn't, a therapist at the time, but I wanted Speak Destiny to be, an empowerment program and organization for women, and, speak and do workshops and things of that nature. But I was the person who was always invested into everybody else's things and had my hands in their things. So by the time it came to the things I had on the shelf, I was exhausted. I was burnt out. I was like, I don't have time for it. But as long as I show up for everybody else and I'm a good friend and getting an A+ in that area, it's fine, right? And it's not. And so that's kind of like a brief story as to my journey of getting here to where I am now, of, now being in the mental health field, or as a licensed clinician for the last few years, and just really, and also in entrepreneurship as well. So, being self-employed, and that journey is, it's a unique journey. It's a beneficial journey. It's also, obviously in my field, there's not a, what is the word I'm looking for? There's no lack in clientele, right? Because so many people are in need, and you don't have to have had something traumatic to happen to you for you to be in need, right? Because again, the work-life balance, that alone is something people are seeking out support in, just dealing with, marital issues, or dealing with the parent-child relationship with the minor children, and the parent-child relationship with adult children. So there's so many, areas where people are seeking out support and treatment, and really finding that balance of how do I be all that I can for them while not neglecting all that I need to be for me and also my family and my household. So that's pretty much where I am now. And a lot of the fears that I allowed to kind of cause me to be stagnant from that point, from 2017 to now, is just, I've kind of like, it's like a slingshot. Like, I'm like, okay, let's wind up, and I'm going for it. I'm going forward. Like, I just completed an ERG today, an employee resource group with a company, a global company. I did it virtually, a 3-week workshop, and I shocked myself because although this is something I always, I want to do more of these, and I've always wanted to do, but pricing, that's always interesting as an entrepreneur, right? And the fact that the price that I put out was accepted without any negotiation, and they're like, oh, go ahead, send the contract. It reminded me like, wow, like I know my worth, and others see the worth in my value, and I got to keep betting on myself and keep going forward. So that just kind of added the fuel and the momentum to what I'm doing, and also how I impact and influence others that I'm working with to do the same, and to really choose themselves and bet on themselves, and realize you've always had what you need inside. You just have to tap into it and foster it and allow it to grow and sprout, and it will. So that's the short to long version.
Well, that's wonderful. And, and I think because your journey to where you are now has had all of these different twists and turns and experiences, that makes you a much better counselor, therapist, especially for my particular population, which are people that may be leaving corporate or have decided somewhere along the line to become an entrepreneur, or just making transitions, period. They can be, fraught with all kinds of fears and limiting beliefs that other people don't see, but that they're dealing with on a regular basis.
Absolutely.
So, in part of your story, I want to just dig a little deeper in that. What, can you just share some pivotal moments, or you could just do one or two from your journey that actually shaped your understanding of mental health and resilience, especially within the context of entrepreneurship?
Okay. So, I have two in particular that kind of one answers each area. So as far as the going into the mental health field and my, personal experiences, I definitely, have dealt with several different family members who deal with debilitating mental health diagnoses. I know oftentimes, we ourselves have experienced depression and, in different, whether it's due to certain losses or, certain areas like such as that. I've definitely, dealt with depression in different periods of my life.
Absolutely.
But I had family members that are dealing with, bipolar schizophrenia and having episodes and, seeing how challenging it is for many family members to deal with certain, individuals. And yes, you could say, oh, this family, but at the end of the day, if that family member becomes violent or that family member, is damaging to somebody's character because of the hateful things that while in a manic space that they begin to spew, it, really kind of opened my eyes like, wow, this is, I saw it in other spaces, growing up in the church and being, my family being in ministry, I saw it from that lens.
Mm-hmm.
But when it hits home, it's definitely different when you experience somebody who is, hearing voices or just starts laughing out of nowhere and can't control themselves, or that person becomes violent and you knew them as, someone who was really had a calm personality. And you're like, what in the world is like, what is going on? And my immediate as well as extended family, for the specific individuals that I'm referencing, now looking back on it, nobody was prepared to embrace or adjust to that shift or to that change in the family dynamic or those individuals, right? And so it was met with the response as far as one, as if the person could help what was taking place, and then also taking things personally, right? And I don't know if I mentioned this to you in our previous conversation, but the 4 Agreements, that's one of the books that I don't take anything personal. That agreement is something that I do try to live by consistently, because when somebody's in a space where they're not present, but they're present, you cannot take those things personally.
No.
It's hard to do. It doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. It doesn't mean that it's not going to impact you, but taking those things personally will have you stuck and still in a space where you can't move. You don't grow, and you also kind of sometimes blame yourself or spend so much energy trying to fight against the person who is you can't, it's just, so I definitely think that really shaped my outlook on going into the mental health field. And just even, some friendships and connections and relationships that I had when I was younger, the support I needed when I was young. I know I shared that when my best friend passed away when I was a teenager. I don't believe that I necessarily got the support that I really needed. I did have a teacher who referred me to the school counselor because they noticed that I was, showing the signs and symptoms of depression, and I would see her. But of course, a school counselor, it's not as consistent or personable, right? And progress requires consistency, as I shared before. So that consistency was necessary, but that's something that, I didn't have. And so I think that along with the family members dynamic caused me to want to be that person to show up in that space of what I needed and what also my family members needed as well. And really didn't have. And to be able to not only provide that service, but to educate and speak with others, because the stakeholders in the lives of individuals dealing with mental health challenges are critical to their wellness journey, right? Because I can provide the support, I can provide the tools, but if you have individuals in the household or just in the family dynamic that are constantly exhibiting behaviors that are very triggering to that individual, right? And putting them in a space where becoming aggressive is the most familiar response or the most comfortable response, you're working so much against their treatment and their progress. And so meeting with somebody once a week, or even I have 2 clients that I meet with twice a week, it's still, you can really hinder their growth and their progress, especially if, again, going back to that agreement, if you're taking things personally from the behaviors and the words that are displayed or stated to you, it and react to those as though they're in the space of someone who is operating in their healthiest space or their healthy mind, then you really are doing not only the person a disservice, but you're doing yourself a disservice, because you're causing more tension, you're causing a more toxic environment, you're causing more situations where you're probably going to have to include the police to come, and take the person from the home. Or if they're not physically violent, sometimes the police will say, well, I'm not going, unless they show that they're planning to do something, we can take them, we can hold them for 72 hours, but after that, if they sign themselves out, especially when they're an adult, it's out of our hands. Yes. And that's kind of like a big challenge within the mental health field as far as like true support, because it's almost in a way, it's that aspect I feel like is very reactionary versus being proactive. But again, certain things are in place, legislature and just the rules that are there. You can't, even if somebody knows somebody needs to be in a facility to stabilize them, to get them in a better space, if that doesn't happen within the first 72 hours and that person chooses to sign themselves out, then you feel like you're back at square one. Mm-hmm. Especially if they're refusing to take their medication, if they're using substances that counteract their medication, alcohol, which is, again, these are coping, people use them to cope. It's not just, I think, also kind of tearing down that stigma as far as, they're doing this, they're a bad person because they're doing this, they're doing that. No, they're trying to survive. Many of us who utilize substances, and I say us to be inclusive, not to say that I, am a substance user, but just to be inclusive. Absolutely. As a community. But, people are really trying to survive. And if they feel numb to whatever experiences they're trying to mask, then they're here another day, and that's really the reality of it. And so it really needs that's the separate diagnosis, right? So substance abuse and alcoholism, and that needs help and support and not judgment. And so I think when we really look at it as a critical issue, as a problem, and as an illness, a disease, then you realize, or hopefully realize, how you can shift how you show up.
Yes.
And again, boundary, to go back to the person people I'm talking about as far as showing up doesn't always mean physically showing up. Sometimes you don't have the bandwidth. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you don't have the capacity to be that ever present being for this individual in your life, or these individuals in your life. And that's okay. That the person may not understand that, but boundaries are important. You can set those boundaries and keep distance if that's what's needed for your own mental wellness, because, it goes both ways. Your mental wellness doesn't need to get neglected or isn't important just because somebody else is battling something that's, more severe in those spaces. Right. So I think that kind of,
you have really just said like a whole mouthful on things that people are battling with every single day. Mm-hmm. These are occurrences that are not like, oh, it's only here, and it's only in this group of people, or it's only in this economic. No. People are battling some form of mental unwellness. I made up that word. At various times in their lives.
Absolutely.
And when we don't know how to cope, while they're trying to cope, mm-hmm. then, we all wind up in a fix. We really wind up in a bad space, because I can remember, like 12-step programs and things like that, mm-hmm. They always had the Al-Anon, not just the AA. And I've always, tried to, whenever I've had clients, because I am a coach, and sometimes mm-hmm. my clients, they need some additional support because I'm not a therapist.
Mhm.
And if they're dealing with stuff from the past, they can't very well move forward.
Right.
So it becomes like a moot point almost. And so I've had, a number of people, especially during the pandemic, that were dealing with losses. Um, and they then lost a job on top of that, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? So then how do you cope? You're coping with the loss of a parent, of a friend, and now a loss of a job, you know what I'm saying? And so some of that gets impacted by the things that have happened in the past, so
Mhm.
that we can't, as a coach, help you to move forward, to get a job, to become, access your tools so that you can become more resilient and be able to keep applying. So I
Mhm.
totally get it. um I work with, mental health professionals because of that reason, and especially since the pandemic. I mean, I've always had to do that, but
Right,
but
right.
especially since the pandemic, because I think that a lot of people are still recovering. Whether you're back to work or not, you're still recovering.
Absolutely. And especially when you hit on the losses that occurred during the pandemic, it's interesting because they hit hard, but because everybody in the world was pretty much in a space of survival, it was still so different. Even I feel like the grieving process was different, right?
Yes.
The actual literal process physically, you could only have, at one point, it was, I think, 15 people at a
And
service, 10 people at a service, and each
yes,
state I
that
knew
was
had
it
their
for
own.
my nephew who passed
Yeah,
away. There were only 10 of us that could be there.
right. And that's an immediate family. That's just an
And that
immediate. That's
wasn't even all the immediate family,
exactly. And
because
so imagine, being in that space, and then and even if you were a part of the list of 10 who could go, the fear that was there, because again, it was like this plague, right? So you're like, well, I want to say my goodbyes. I want to go. And this is the way we know to do it, is to attend the service, to say our final goodbyes. But now I'm fearful of my life, because what if I catch, COVID, and now now they're here for me in a week, so it was that there was
yes,
so much where fear literally overpowered so much in our decision making and even our processing of things. And so I think that even with coming out of the pandemic, um, people are now being able to, whew, okay, now let me identify and address what just took place in that 3-year
3
period,
years,
where
3 years.
I literally felt like I was on skates, but also felt like I was still at the same time, like frozen in time, but also on
Frozen.
skates. And it's like, how do both exist? But somehow it did. And so I think that you bring up a great point with that, because the losses were significant. People, when you're in a space of, you're not literally able to cope, or not being able to have the outlets that you once were able to, whether going out to eat or connecting with friends, or getting on a plane and going on a trip, all of those things shifted and changed for everybody. It didn't matter, like you said, the socioeconomic status didn't matter. It didn't matter if you had the ability to fly first class or whatever. Planes were literally having 4 people on them at certain times, because just the fear of flying, right? And so that's critical. And then you have a dynamic where, okay, if somebody lost a loved one, then lost a job, sometimes in correlation, not just because of the pandemic, but in correlation to productivity,
Mhm.
because, hey, I'm grieving, I lost this person, but I still have to show up and be my best self, but I can't do it. Now I'm out of a job. And if I'm out of a job, unless I have another level of support, more than likely I have to shift lifestyles and possibly move. There were several evictions occurring. There were several people who had to either downsize or had to move in with loved ones. And that causes another level of tension. And now I have housing, but now I'm living in a stressful environment
Right.
that's not conducive to my wellness, nor the person's wellness who is housing me, and or my children and spouse and dog and whoever. And
Right.
so then it seems that cycle just keeps, like, I can't get out. I'm running so fast, but yet I end up behind my starting point.
That's
It's
right.
like, how does that happen? So yeah, it definitely, I do believe people are kind of now in the last year, 2023 to 2024, feeling like I can exhale. I don't have the level of fear. Like even if I contract COVID and I'm, that I don't fear that it's going to be the level of what it once was, right? Yeah. Because it was brand new, it was fresh, it was, and we did lose many people. I personally have lost several people. There was, somebody, he's not my blood brother, but somebody who I grew up calling my brother since even before I was born, passed away in 2022, COVID. And so, it really, it was quite a time, as people say, a time to be alive. It was quite a time to be alive, and not in a good way. However, with that, so many people I speak with, myself included, grew immensely in that time period, whether it was learning a new skill, honing in on skills that they thought died years ago. It caused them and forced them in some cases to tap into the entrepreneurial side. Yes. Or their side, let me go ahead and make a face mask because all the stores were out of masks, right? So I saw people on my Facebook page who were making the masks and donating them to nurses and things like that. And then they started selling them on Etsy because there was a demand for it. And so they said, oh, if I could do this, let me go ahead and start making other crafts because, and so it really opened doors, and the number of entrepreneurs during that time period skyrocketed. It skyrocketed. And when we as a people, speaking of resilience, I'll do a little transition. When we as a people, are some of the most resilient beings, on earth. And I do believe that, when pushed to the fire and in a space of, hey, I have no other option, some people may feel like, hey, I crumble. And then some people may say, you know what? Just like, baking bread, I will rise, or a cake, I'll rise in the middle of in the heat, in the fire, right? And many people did. They arose to the occasion, and they're thriving now because of the storms and the hell that they experienced during those time frames. Because Absolutely. They say, hey, I have no other way. My back is against the wall. What do I got to do? I just got to start swinging. And they came out swinging, and they came out thriving. It didn't feel like thriving initially because you feel like you're still underwater. But as days went on and months went on and years went on, right? Can you believe now it's 4 years? It felt like it was all 3 of those years still feel like 1 year, but it also felt so long at the same time. And so, people really were able to tap in and hone in on to things that they didn't really pay attention to before, learned more about themselves, spent more time outside, spent more time with their families. Yes. Maybe because they were laid off, but it still was an opportunity that they did not have before. And me as well. Like, I did not have that before. But how people say, well, I thank God for those storms. I know this may seem controversial, but honestly, I believe that I'm at the space I'm in now because of the pandemic and being forced to sit down. Like, how old folks say, go sit down somewhere. Like, I needed to go sit down somewhere because I was always ripping and running. Like, I was always on the go. And I kind of still am on the go, but it's like, I feel like now I have more choice in being on the go. Whereas before, I felt like I had to be at everything. I had to, like, I'm more, I don't want to say selective, but if I can't make it, I won't try to rip and run. Like before, I'd be like, oh, I'm in Virginia today, but let me try to make it up to Jersey for your thing. And let me try to, it was like, I would literally be going crazy trying to make things happen, make the impossible happen at the expense of my wellness. Yes. But now, after being sat down for those 3 years, I published my book that I started years before the pandemic. I took the NCE that I should have taken 2013 when I was graduating with my master's. I at the time, 2020 or 2021, I applied to a doctoral program, but I declined because there were certain things with the president at that school that I did not align with, didn't align with my beliefs and just the hatred that was spewed. So, I declined that, but now I'm here and started my doctoral program in the fall. I haven't even shared that yet with my family. My one person in my family knows, as well as my husband, but I got the letter last week.
Now they know.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm good with saying it now. And so, and I'm just waiting on, funding. And like I already claimed, like I'm not paying 100% out of pocket for this program. And it's just, I'm so excited about it. But again, that's something where I'm thinking PhD. I was like, whoa, that's intimidating. That's like the rigor is like, but I'm so at the level of betting on myself that I'm like, girl, you already got it in you. Like, what's up now? Like, you ready? And so that's really like the mindset that I have, that I really was intentional, even though I didn't intend it to happen that way. But since those moments, I've been so intentional with really focusing on like being the better me. Obviously, I still got room and got ways to go. But to be intentional with being a work in progress and doing the work to as being a work in progress. So yeah, definitely.
Well, I just have a couple more questions.
Okay.
And that is, in your experience, what are some effective strategies? Because, when I have my guest professionals on, I really always want them to be able to start to drop some nuggets, some things that especially our entrepreneurs and even like their family members can take. They may not be able to take the whole thing, but take, a couple of points or one point and be able to, do something with it so that they can themselves grow and flourish. So what are some effective strategies for entrepreneurs to help them to prioritize self-care? Because I heard what you were saying. It's like I took stuff off the shelf. I started taking care. Basically, I heard you say you were taking care of yourself and your own needs while still navigating the demands of everything else that was going on. And that's one of the things that I think that a lot of entrepreneurs, especially in urban areas, struggle with. That's one of the additional things. So what strategies?
Well, the first strategy I'll share is unlearning that you have to be the savior. Unlearning that, because I definitely dealt with, and sometimes it may creep up a little bit, but definitely dealt with the savior complex, right? If it's not me, then it won't get done. And when you unlearn that, that's a practice of self-care right there.
Oh, you are not kidding.
So, right. And so that right there, and then let's put, if this was an outline, I'll put that as the Roman numeral number 1, and then letter A would be boundaries, right? And so boundaries is something that it's just so, it's critical. And everybody's boundaries are going to look different. And a side note with boundaries, most people are not going to be happy that you now have boundaries and that you implemented. Those that have benefited from your lack of boundaries will be pissed off. Because, whoa, what you mean you're saying no? What you mean you can't help me move? What do you mean you can't? Dr. Nidra Tawwab has a book, I think, Find Boundaries, Find Peace, I believe it's called, or Set Boundaries, Find Peace. And it's a game changer. It is I stand by that book. Just because you can technically, like in your schedule, it may say you're available. That doesn't mean you have to be available to others. So as an entrepreneur, especially as entrepreneurs, we hold many hats, right? We do the finances, we do the promotion, the marketing, all these different hats. Delegate. What does delegating look like, right? You say, oh, I don't have it in the budget. Identify where is it. Okay, if you can get a VA or virtual assistant or even an intern, but a virtual assistant on, let's say, Upwork or Fiverr, those are great resources that I stand by, because I use those resources for different projects that I've been working on, and excellent quality individuals. And you can look and say, okay, who's within my budget? Okay, maybe I could just have help, maybe 2 hours a month. Just taking those 2 hours out saves you probably, maybe, let's say, I'd say probably 10 hours, because even though it's technically 2 hours of work, when you put it on yourself, it's combined with so many other things that it really is not 2 hours that you're doing it. But when you delegate those 2 hours to somebody else, they're focusing solely on those areas for those 2 hours.
That is so true.
Yes. Another nugget, consistency. Find you a routine. Get a routine that works for you. Stay consistent with the things, especially the hard things. So if it's hard for you, my husband always says this. He listens to the book Discipline is Destiny by Ryan something. I can't remember his name, but Discipline is Destiny is an excellent book as well. But he's always, talking about shift your schedule as far as, you say it's hard for you to wake up. You're not a morning person. It starts the night before. That's what he talked about in the book. And I try to do that. I've definitely been waking up earlier. not the earliest, so I'm still not a 6 a.m. riser, but you know, I rise, I get up and start my day earlier than what I was doing, you know, last year and the year before, right? And so being intentional with like what type of day you're going to have and not letting moments in a day dictate the rest of the day. So saying, oh my goodness, it was so much traffic. Somebody was beeping at me. They gave me the finger. I spilled my coffee on me on the way to work. And then today's a horrible day. People will say that and it's only 11 a.m. And it's like, well, how are you saying like 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 is going to be horrible because one, you've stated it, you've declared it, but also just because you had a couple of bad episodes in the morning within an hour period, that means the rest of the 23 hours are going to be the same.
Yes.
So really be mindful of what you're saying, what you're speaking. And then some of the obvious nuggets, which, you know, I know we hear so many people talk about doing those things like exercising, getting out the house, going for walks. You know, we found a trail by our house, like during the pandemic. We've been here for over a decade and we did not find this trail. Again, when we got forced to sit down, we started figuring out ways and things to do. So my husband found a trail like not too far from us and we started going on family walks, like, you know, kids ride the bikes or skateboard. And, you know, it was just such it is such an enjoyable thing. And I've never been an outside like nature person. That's not me because I see like a spider hanging on a web and but I really do enjoy the walks. Like we even go in the wintertime. It's so beautiful. Like I'm always taking pictures and it's amazing. And it's so therapeutic. You can really clear your mind. It's so helpful. It's so therapeutic. Another nugget,
is great.
Journal. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Journaling. I'd like to give one more nugget.
And then journaling. Yep.
Okay. That is excellent. So, you know, earlier you talked about triggers.
Mm-hmm.
And so how can entrepreneurs recognize and address triggers or emotional obstacles that can hinder their success?
So how can they identify it is when your body shifts, when you notice a difference taking place, right? Mm-hmm. So a trigger will usually show up because we identify something by one of the senses, right? With something we may see, smell, hear, touch, you know, taste, or any of those senses. So when we feel the trigger, meaning when we feel a shift in our body, whether we feel like a flood of emotions, like we feel like, hey, why am I about to cry? Or when we feel our heart racing, mm-hmm. you know, that's, you know, a trigger. Something that causes us to, you know, immediately go to a dark space or reminds us of something that we thought was like dead and gone. Like, what? I didn't even think about this since I was 8 years old. Like, and that sense connects the trigger to our brain and causes that to like almost like a flashback, an immediate flashback. And we can't control that it happens. But when we identify that it happens, then we're now aware of it and we need to take note of it and say, okay, this is an area I need to tap into and address, because I'm not over this. I'm not healed from this. I haven't forgiven this person, or I haven't, you know, forgiven myself for whatever, you know, this, you know, whatever traumatic situation may have occurred, or something that, you know, sometimes you blame self and you're not even at fault. And so definitely when you feel those shifts and changes within your body and the emotional space that you're in, you feel like you just kind of go into a dark space, but the lights are still on and you're like, whoa, this ain't, you journal about the feelings and that emotional space that you're in, but also go ahead and look at psychologytoday.com, put your insurance in, filter your zip code, find a qualified therapist or a support group, because sometimes therapy can seem or sound intimidating to some people, especially with there being a stigma. If you're still believing the stigma and feeling like, no, it's not for me, or Black people don't do that, or that's only a rich people thing, if that is still your belief, go ahead and look at a support group on Psychology Today. You know, support for, you know, domestic abuse victims, or if you're dealing with grief and loss as a child, or a child who's been, you know, dealt with foster care system, or whatever that is, find a support group that connects with your trauma and, you know, begin working through and talking through, because when we talk through, it makes it real. And if we silence it, it doesn't make it real. It doesn't make it not real. It just masks it as if it's not impacting you. But the reality is, if you get in trigger, it's impacting you, and you're not healed from it. You're not through it. So
yeah, you're absolutely right. As I mentioned, I'd come back from Cambodia, and I was going between. It was on some waterway, and I realized that this was, they kept saying the Mekong, and I realized that this was the Mekong Delta from the Vietnam War and for a split second, I remember, you know, some of like the guys and stuff that came back from Vietnam and all of that, and I just had this real sadness. And so, right then, I actually, my interpreter said, well, what's going on? And I said, well, I just had a moment where I remember that I'm in a place that I remember historically was a terrible time, in the world. And it was a terrible time for people who were service members. Because I have service members that, served, and friends of friends, brothers and sisters of friends that served during that time. And I know how nasty it was, with them coming back. And so as I talked to him about it, I was able to, get through it, and I enjoyed the rest of my time. But just for a split second, I did notice, and he did too, that my whole energy shifted.
Yeah. You'll feel it, but again, we learn to mask things. Oh, I feel uncomfortable. Let me mask it and suppress it. And so when we identify, like I said, one of the nuggets, when you identify, you feel it, tap into that. No, it won't feel good, but it's necessary, because we have to, if we don't feel it, we have to face what we feel, right? And we can't face what we don't feel. So you need that in order to really heal. So,
well, I tell you, Destiny, our time, I can't believe our time.
I know
it's almost gone. But I just wanted, give you, a couple of minutes just to share, anything that you would like to leave our listening and viewing audience with on, this area of, how they can support and maintain mental wellness, especially as an entrepreneur, or if a member of their family is looking on or is listening to now or the replay, that they may have some strategies that will be able to help them. Yeah.
So when those moments come up, when those triggers occur, just like it just happened with you the other day, take a pause, take a moment, allow yourself to feel and be present in that moment. Be mindful. There's, mindfulness practice is so important. Be mindful of what's occurring. Take those moments to take some deep breaths. Deep breathing is such a helpful and therapeutic strategy. Oftentimes we think self-care are things that require us to spend money. It can, those things are great, but the soul nourishment, those things, they don't cost a thing. Those things that really heal and mend our soul, that soul care is free. Soul care is the time with nature, is the time with self, is the time journaling, those deep breathing techniques. And you don't have to learn a full technique. Yes, there are rhythmic techniques and all of that, but just take a pause and be mindful and present in the moment. Take about 10 deep breaths. Count them. Count to 10. 10 seconds is a long time when you're doing something like a deep breath, right? 10 seconds is quick when you're speaking, but when you're intentionally focusing on your inhaling and exhaling, you're really allowing your mind to settle and focus in on your breathing and calm yourself and be mindful. So that's what I would like to leave you all with. Journaling, deep breathing, being mindful.
Well, I tell you, this has been a rich conversation, Destiny. And even though the topic it's serious. You know what I mean? Having you as a guest on the show made it delightful,
Thank
even
you. I
though it
appreciate
was,
that.
so I really do. You gave it a very compassionate but energetic, um, amount of energy to this. So it's like it didn't feel heavy.
Mm.
That's what I mean.
That's the goal.
So
Less intimidating causes you to want to really focus on those areas, right? Because if something feels intimidating, you're not even going to show up. And I try to be my authentic self in all areas, including, professionally. Yes, I obviously take it seriously. Yes, I have the credentials and the education to back it up, but I also am my true authentic self, and I show up in those spaces where I've had a walk in those shoes. Not I like everybody else's, but in my own walk in those shoes. So I definitely try to be my authentic self, and I think that that's what's been helpful for people to gravitate to show up, but then also do the work because they trust the process. So.
Absolutely, and they trust the guide.
I appreciate that.
And so, how can people get in touch with you if they want, to talk with you about your services, or any other things that you do?
Okay, well, you all can reach me at my website, speakdestiny.com. I'm also on social media, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and the handle is I Speak Destiny, just the letter I, Speak Destiny. And my email address is info@speakdestiny.com. So anything Speak Destiny, you'll find is me. But those are the ways you can reach me. All of that is also located on my website, speakdestiny.com.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for spending this time with us and sharing your insight, your experiences, sharing your heart, and sharing your wisdom. So, because I know that in business we're always talking about making a profit, making a difference, but sometimes we need to also take care of ourselves. And this time on the Urban Entrepreneur Show is one of those times in which I created it so that for a few minutes each week, our urban entrepreneurs particularly can take a pause and tap in to the wisdom of the presenters, of the professionals that we bring.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you for what you do and the difference you're making within our community. It's definitely needed and necessary. So thank you. And thank you for having me.
Yes. And so, my friends, as we wrap up another exciting episode of the Urban Entrepreneur Show, I just want to extend once again my heartfelt thanks to our guest, Miss Destiny. And you can reach her at speakdestiny.com, as well as her other handles on social media. This young lady is just full of life and a lot of energy, and she is someone that can help you if you need that kind of support, or if you want that kind of support. Sometimes we need stuff, but until we want it,
right.
It's not
different things.
And so you can find out more about her again by going to speakdestiny.com. Now, this show was brought to you by Thrive Leadership Institute. You can find out more about us by going to thriveleadershipinstitute.com. Consider us your source for coaching, training, resources, and other things that will supercharge your professional and personal growth. And if you are an entrepreneur that has a great story to tell and also some strategies and tips to share, then consider joining us as a guest on the Urban Entrepreneur Show. You can reach us by going to the www.theurbanentrepreneurshow.com. And you'll be glad that you did. So reach out to us, learn more, and then apply. So that again wraps up one more edition of the Urban Entrepreneur Show. I just want to thank everyone for joining us tonight, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye for now.
Have a good one. Thank you.